Welcome to Project Management 101. Today, we're simplifying the core of the method, the 7 PRINCE2 Principles. If the textbook has you confused, don't worry. In the next 10 minutes, I'll cut out all the jargon and I'll break down the 7 principles with real-world examples based on my 15 years in IT and software delivery. By the end, you'll feel confident about applying them, whether you're a new project manager or you're just studying the fundamentals. Hit that subscribe button for more PRINCE2 and Agile tips. Now let's dive straight in with principle number 1. So principle number 1 of the 7 principles of PRINCE2 is continued business justification. To define this simply, if the project stops being worth the cost, you should stop the work. Why this principle exists is to help stop those zombie projects, the ones that eat your budget long after the business case has been worth its value. In terms of applying this principle, we don't just check it once, we check it every single stage gate. And within PRINCE2 there's quite a few of them, and we should check and we should ask, is this project still meeting its goals, its expectations? Is it still worth spending the money to move us forward? A couple of examples of things that we might see in the market may make us question and stop this. Things like a competitor popping up with a superior product. Maybe that removes the need and the speed for us to implement our product. Or maybe there's a off-the-shelf solution which implements 80% of the value that our project will deliver, but it can do it cheaper than we can build it. They're all things that we should consider with the project board to help make the right decision, and we should consider this at every stage boundary within the PRINCE2 project lifecycle. We, as project managers, play an important part in this, and we should help to make the project board understand the value and work with them around the benefits and the continued justification, and we should make a recommendation to stop if we don't think it's worth the time and effort that we think we're expending on it. Principle number 2 of the 7 PRINCE2 principles is learn from experience, and to simplify that is let's not repeat our past mistakes. Ultimately, we seek, we record, and we apply lessons throughout the project lifecycle, continually, iteratively, learning and changing. The reason why this principle exists, without this, every project manager is forced to reinvent the wheel in every project, whereas corporate data and corporate knowledge should help us build a long-term repository of when things didn't go very well versus things that went really well. And as project managers, we should deep dive into that repository to make sure we don't repeat over and over again those same past mistakes. Think of it as knowledge is currency, and we need to get it in the bank. In the real world, this is a two-way street. At the start of a project and continuously through the project manager should be checking the corporate lessons learned bank. What went well, what didn't go so well, and then throughout the project lifecycle, the project manager and the team should be asking those questions of each other and recording them in the project lessons learned log. At the end, there should be a review with mitigation actions and recommendations made that they can then be stored in the corporate lessons learned log. We want to continually add knowledge to that knowledge bank. So those two questions, what went well versus what could have gone better, will give us a great knowledge foundation to help the next project and the next project manager. Principle number 3 of the 7 PRINCE2 principles is defined roles and responsibilities. To simplify this principle, no one needs to or should need to ask who does what. We define clear roles, responsibilities and work with all of the team members so we're clear on who's accountable for what at the start of the project. No grey areas. This principle solves the real world problem of ambiguity. Ambiguity in structure and command structures within a waterfall project leads to grey areas. It leads to scope creep, it leads to budget waste, and can lead to many dysfunctions within the team. We aim to set out the following 3 roles very clearly to avoid those situations. In PRINCE2, we set out to define the 3 areas as the business, the user and the supplier. In the real world, myself as a program manager and you as a project manager, I set out to fill these roles with the right people. This helps the project board get a balanced view of the user, the business and the supplier side of the relationships. Within PRINCE2, the senior user represents the customer's needs, ultimately ensuring that the final product is fit for purpose. Principle number 4 of the 7 PRINCE2 principles is manage by stages. The simplified definition of this is not to plan the whole project at once. Break it into smaller stages so it can be reviewed with the project board. Because the reason this principle exists is to help mitigate financial risk. The more of the project you execute without checking the continued business justification, making sure that it still meets the needs of the user, and many more things that we want to consider, risks, wider industry, wider context of your organisation. By breaking the project into those smaller chunks, it means the stage gates come around quicker and therefore we can stop spending money if it's not the right thing to do anymore, or we can stop the work if we're going in the wrong direction, make some changes, pivot and set off in a different direction. So by breaking the project into those smaller chunks, you avoid and help to mitigate the cause of why this principle exists. It's really the insurance policy against the unknown. In the real world, and any corporate environment, as a project manager, where you're utilising waterfall, maybe PRINCE2 approaches, come into the end of a stage, i.e. the stage gate. As a project manager, I create an end of stage report, plus a plan for the next stage, and then I go in for an end of stage boundary meeting with the project board. And then the project board can really check the performance of the previous stage before authorising the spend to start the next stage of the project, and it gives us really an ultimate checkpoint with non-negotiable gatekeeping based on the project's success and its direction. Principle number 5 of the 7 PRINCE2 principles is manage by exception. So the simplified definition of this is to escalate only when things exceed your agreed tolerances. The reason why this principle exists is because you're working very closely with the project board. They can be very senior stakeholders. You need to protect their time and use it wisely for when things are really necessary. As a project manager, a senior project manager and a program manager, you have a good amount of knowledge, seniority and leadership within an organisation structure. So you are the first port of call, the first port of escalation, and really the person that would try to work within the organisation to solve issues and therefore only escalate in an issue when it becomes necessary. One thing to bear in mind is, as a project manager, you should stay within your tolerances that are agreed within your project initiation document. So it's important that you don't exceed those whilst trying to solve the problem, and escalate if you need additional time, cost, or questions around quality. But if it's within those tolerances, go ahead, solve it. Don't escalate. It's yours to own as the project manager. In the real world, as a project manager, utilising PRINCE2, if you have a project tolerance that allows for a 10% variance of the time metric, for example, you may be able to accept a 3-day delay, whereas a full week delay, you might need to raise an exception report to the project board. So there's visibility, sign off, appropriate budget can be carved out if there's going to be impacts to the overall budget, and stakeholders can start to be realigned if we're going to exceed the expectations of the plan's delivery dates. Principle number 6 of the 7 PRINCE2 principles is focus on products. And the simplified way to think about this is to really define the deliverables, i.e. the products, first. Don't get bogged down in making a pretty plan if we don't know what we're aiming to achieve, and therefore definition of the products is one of the key principles. And the reason why this exists is it helps to avoid ambiguity and scope creep within the project delivery. If you define the output clearly, it's easier to measure quality and whether you've actually delivered the outcome that you're aiming to. In the real world, as a project manager, we would use the project descriptions to help our scope and control within the project stage of actually building the thing. Maybe things like the security definition or the performance controls for the piece of work, whether it's a piece of software or something else, all of that is clearly documented within the product descriptions. If it meets the product description, then great, it's done. If it doesn't, then it fails and it requires rework. Principle number 7 of the 7 PRINCE2 principles is tailor to suit the project environment. The simplified definition of this principle is only use the parts of PRINCE2 that suit your environment and or the culture and or the organisation. The reason why this principle exists is PRINCE2 is a tool ultimately, and a small project versus a multi-million pound contract may require very different project controls, and it shouldn't be a burden to implement using a skilled project manager with some sensible controls. So this principle makes us think about that. So in a real world application, this is where your Agile experience comes in clutch. Perhaps for a small software delivery, you might think about combining some of the roles, maybe the user and the business. Maybe you think about simplifying documentation, where we might do product descriptions. Do they become user stories, features, epics? Ultimately, you take the structure and control that PRINCE2 gives you, but you simplify it for the speed of agility and working closely with your team, but keeping your board informed, making sure you've got the right tolerances in place, and making sure everybody's talking regularly to keep the speed, but keep everybody clear, so we're all aiming for the right outcome. So there you have it. They're the 7 PRINCE2 principles simplified. These 7 principles are the foundations for clarity and control in every project environment. If this simplified tutorial helped you, smash that like button. Now you understand the foundations, it's time to go and understand how PRINCE2 compares to Agile. Click the banner in the top corner where I'll pop up a link to my video where I explain the difference between Agile, Waterfall and hybrid methodologies. It's a great next step. Thanks for watching Project Management 101. I upload videos every week, generally on a Saturday or a Sunday. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those. I'll see you next week. From chaos to clarity, take care.